Okay, if you are a customer experience professional looking to deliver a rock star customer experience to your customers, then stay tuned because we are talking to Shep Hyken today, the king of customer service. And we are talking about how leadership affects customer experience, how to improve it, and why it is so important. Okay, so I am James Dodkins, and I used to be a real-life, actual, legit, award-winning rock star, but I'm not anymore. But I am on a mission to fill the world with customer experience rock stars, and that is why I talk to the best customer experience minds from all around the world to find out how, together, we can better deliver that rock star customer experience. So the guest we have got today, as I mentioned, is Shep Hyken, the king of customer service. And we're going to be talking about how leadership affects customer experience, understanding how a great leader can really help deliver great customer experience, why it's so important, and how we can improve our own leadership in our companies. So if you are watching live, make sure to show me some love in the comments. Say hi to Shep in the comments too. If you've got any questions, make sure to put them in the comments also. Look, if you are interested in this, maybe some other people are going to be interested in this. Maybe your friends, maybe your family, maybe some colleagues. So share and spread the love. So we are live today and you are tuned into ROCKSTAR CX. And I want to introduce today's
customer experience rockstar,
who is Shep Hyken. And again, I've bigged him up already, but Shep is a customer service and customer experience expert. He is the chief amazement officer, which is probably the best title I've ever heard at Shepherd presentations. He's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. And when it comes to customer experience and customer service, he's hands down one of the best speakers going. But before we speak to Shep, I just want to say a massive thank you to
www.rockstar.cx.
www.rockstar.cx for making this show possible today. If you are interested in customer experience improvement consultancy and training, if you are interested in customer-centric culture transformation, if you are interested in the ultimate rockstar team building experience, and if you are interested in rockstar keynote speakers, then make sure to go to www.rockstar.cx. So through the power of the internet and magic, we should be able to speak to Shep right now. Let's see if this... Are you there? Can you hear me?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much so. How is everything going?
Everything's great. And by the way, when you said I used to be award-winning, I'm not anymore. Once you win the award, you always have the award. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, look, so I'm not the only one in the world that plays music. I understand you play a little bit of music as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Wow, I've been playing music since I was about maybe 11 or 12 years old, and I'm the only one in my band that's never been paid to play. I get to play with some great rock stars, and really have had a fun time doing it. Every once in a while, I actually get to get out. Matter of fact, this week is Social Media Marketing World in the U.S., San Diego. Last year, I brought some of the friends of mine that I play with, and we opened the meeting for about 4,000 people, sang a bunch of songs, played a bunch of songs. Not the metal stuff that you do, but I'd say, let's see, about how I love Santana. How's that?
Yeah, I'll take that.
You'll take Carlos?
Yeah, see, the interesting thing is I actually love all sorts of music. If it's good, I like it. The reason I played heavy metal is because it was just the most fun. So like as an angry teenager, that's the thing that you go and play. Now, kind of wish I would have chosen pop music because I'd be living in a bigger house right now. But that's fine. Had some good experiences out of it. So yeah, I saw that you were chilling out with Kerry King the other day. Now, for those of you out there who don't know who Kerry King is a guitar player from a band called Slayer. Okay, Slayer are they're a legend in the thrash world. And if you've never listened to them, maybe you should. you might like them. Who knows? So yeah, why were you hanging out with Kerry King?
And if you're hanging out with Kerry, it means you're angry. No, because Slayer, one of those angry metal bands. I was at an event called NAMM, N-A-M-M, the National Association of Music Merchants, and a bunch. I tell you what's cool about that show is you walk around. There's so many rock stars and members of great bands that we all know. It's like I'm the minority hanging out with these guys, and so we're at dinner, and I was just hanging out with a bunch of rock stars, and it was a lot of fun.
Brilliant. So, look, you released a book last October, Be Amazing or Go Home.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about, have you got a copy there?
Isn't that a coincidence?
Who'd have thought it? So tell us a little bit more about the book, what it's about, what's in there, and where people can get it as well.
Sure. Basically, get it through Amazon is the easiest place to get it anywhere in the world. You could, well, I guess in Australia, they just now opened up to Amazon, but most places have it. So here's the reason for the book. About 2 years ago, one of the people that work with me, my assistant, kept coming in late every day. And I didn't understand why it was happening. It turns out she had moved, and she moved so far away, she couldn't figure out how long it was taking to get to work. But every day, she'd come in 10 or 15 minutes late for about 4 days in a row. So I sat down with her. I said, what's going on here? And she explained it to me. I said, what's our mantra here at Shepherd Presentations, our company? And she said, to always be amazing. That's her mantra. We want to always be amazing for our clients, for the people that work here. And we want to teach our clients to be amazing to their customers, clients, members, whatever they want to call them. And I said, do you think showing up every day late is amazing behavior? And she said, no, it's not. And I said, well, then here's the choice. Be amazing or go home. And she goes, oh, that's a great title for a book. Write it down. So I wrote it down. And the first chapter is about her. Now, we've changed the names to protect the innocent. But by the way, I said, you've got to fix this habit. And that's when I realized customer service, customer experience, a lot of the things that we do as individuals, it's all about good habits or unfortunately bad habits. The bad habit of showing up late needed to be fixed, become a good habit. And when a good habit doesn't even seem like a habit because it's natural, well, then you're on the right place and on the right pace. So she figured it out. She turned it around. At the end of the year, I said, you get a huge raise, and all was beautiful.
So what do you think one of the easiest ways is to change a habit within a company?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize that there's a problem to begin with. And then if you're going to create if you want to turn it around, just decide what the end result is going to be and what you need to get there. It's just like any other project. There's going to be a deadline. You're going to find out what the obstacles are that might be in the way of making that habit happen. So it's just a matter of practicing it over and over again until it becomes normal. And I always emphasize it's the word goals is kind of interesting, but if your goal is to show up on time every day, what's getting in the way of that happening? In this case, she lived now, instead of living 2 miles away, she lived 35 miles away. She wasn't sure what time to come to work. And this is how we described how we handled the situation. I said, what are you doing to get here every day? And she says, I'm leaving a little bit earlier and earlier. I said, well, you've got it backwards. You need to leave really, really early. Get here like a half an hour early, and then say, I don't need to be here a half an hour early. Why don't I leave 5 minutes later tomorrow and see how the traffic is? And work your way toward the number from the other direction. Sometimes that's all it takes. So first of all, recognize that there's an issue. What behavior do you want it to be? And then figure out what's getting in the way of making that happen, and then design a plan to make it happen.
Okay, I mean, that's great advice. So, I mean, let's say, for example, there are people out there that are maybe just starting new jobs. What's your best advice for helping people not form bad habits in the first place?
Well, I mean, let's hope that they don't have those habits to begin with, but some of them do. And by the way, if they are bad habits, ultimately what will happen is somebody's going to notice, and that could be a problem for future employment or future growth within the company. So, I've narrowed it down, and I don't know how we came up with 7 basic core habits, but the first one is that amazing people show up ready to amaze. And that's showing up on time, how you show up. It's not like I walk in, it's time to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's I walk in and I'm ready to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that means mentally and physically. Somebody rushing in 1 minute before 8, throwing their things down, turning on their computer. I made it by the deadline. They're not mentally ready to go. And I think people notice this. Amazing people, they're proactive, so they anticipate what's coming, so they deal with it before it's a problem. Lots of different habits. There's actually 35 habits in the book. However, we've broken them down into 7 sections. So anyway, I know that customer experience and customer service are very tightly aligned. They're different in some cases. A big part of the customer experience is service. Service is provided by people typically, and that people-to-people interaction, it's all about good habits and making things happen the way they should happen.
Okay, so I mean, you brought up an interesting thing there, the difference between customer service and customer experience. What do you think? Let's say there was a complete newbie that knew nothing about customer experience and customer service. How would you explain the difference to them?
Sure. Well, first of all, customer service in my world is not a department. It's a philosophy. Many people think customer service is the phone number you call to talk to the people who handle your complaints and your problems. So the culture of an organization is focused on customer service, which means everybody is involved in service. That's number one. The number two is to recognize that they have a role to play in this service experience. That means that I call it the awesome responsibility, that their behavior at any given time, people are going to say, I love working, and from the outside, if they deal directly with a customer, I love working with them. They're so friendly, they're knowledgeable, they're helpful. And it's usually not a they, it's a he or a she. So they have this awesome responsibility. So we want to make sure they understand that from the standpoint of delivering a great experience, that's their job. That's customer service. Now, customer experience is all of that plus every other touch point that company has with the customer. If you, it could be the packaging that the product is shipped in. What's the impression that the customer has when they open up the box? Just yesterday, I received a box from our good friends at Amazon. I open it up and they have the little air bubbles so that my items won't move around. Had I opened up this large box and seen this thing just sitting there by itself, knowing as it's been shipped, it's been sliding around and bumped around and everything else, what's my impression? That is actually part of a great service experience. So think of Apple. Do you have an iPhone?
I do.
You do. Do you remember the box that it came in?
I do.
Yeah.
It was lovely.
It was lovely. It was cool. You open up and go, wow, just the experience of opening it up and right there it is, customer experience. That's part of it.
That's great. It's good to see the difference between it and start to understand that the customer service by itself isn't necessarily enough to deliver an amazing customer experience. It helps, but it's not the be all and end all. It's about understanding that there's things going on before and after when the customers actually interact with you as an organization. So it's a really good way to think about it. So you've spoken about habits, but I want to move the conversation on to habitats. Okay. Habitats. So like the culture of an organization and bring in this idea of leadership. So look, in your opinion, why is leadership so important when it comes to delivering that amazing customer experience?
The best way to describe it is through example. If you've ever flown different airlines, for example, you're in the UK, is that right?
It is.
So what's the largest airline is probably British Airways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The coolest airline is Virgin.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And if you've flown on both, they're very different experiences, aren't they?
Very much so.
And I would say that the reason those experiences are quite different. By the way, Virgin, about 2 or 3 years ago, I had to do, I'm going to say 8 or 9 international trips. And as an experiment, I wanted to fly on all these great airlines that have been touted as great, Singapore Airlines, Virgin, but I wanted to fly international. So I flew on all of these airlines. Who do you think won number one, coolest, best experience I had?
I'm not going to take a guess in case I get it wrong.
You know, you're going to get it right because it's right there in your backyard. Virgin.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It was, first of all, it just was a great experience. And the people were wonderful. And anyway, I digress. Why is British Air's experience different than Virgin's? There's a leader calling the shots, making the experience happen, setting the vision, setting the tone for the type of business this is going to be. And Sir Richard Branson, has done an amazing job of putting the cool factor into flying. And that's exactly what happened. And I experienced that. The food was great. By the way, the food on some of the international airlines like, Qatar or Emirates, unbelievable experience. The food on Virgin, same thing. But I got to tell you, the flight attendants, how hard they work, the cool bar that I got to sat in and hang out in the business lounge. The business lounge on the plane. Okay, just everything about the experience was wonderful. So anyway, I think that you basically have a leader calling the shots. Here in the U.S., we have Southwest Airlines and then every other airline. And Southwest Airlines, Herb Kelleher, when he started Southwest Airlines, focused on the people. He said, he was asked, what's more important, the stakeholders or stockholders, the investors, the passengers who are their customers, or the employees? And he thought about it, and he said, it's definitely the employees, because if we make the employees happy, they'll engage better with the passengers. Passengers will be happy. They'll want to fly again. That's going to make the stakeholders really happy. So, that's the difference. So many times companies are focused on operations versus people and excellence. And operational excellence is one thing, but people-to-people excellence, well, that's a whole different experience. You could have the greatest operation in the world, the greatest product in the world. But if you've got lousy customer service, and that's the people-to-people interaction to go along with it, people are going to say, even though it's a great product, I just don't feel good when I do business with them. Let me see if I could go find somewhere else to do business with. And sometimes they do. And by the way, if it's the other way around, where the service is incredible, the people are the friendliest people in the world, but the product doesn't do what it's supposed to do, doesn't matter. If it's an airplane that doesn't take off half of the time, no matter how nice the people are, somebody's going to say, half the time I can't even get my flight. I'm going to go to the airlines that are more reliable, even if it means taking a hit on the experience, because it takes a combination of the two, a great product and the great service, to be amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting because Richard Branson takes that same view to put the employees first, the customer second, and the shareholders
All right,
third.
Somehow the picture's gone blank. I can keep talking forever if we're still broadcasting.
Yeah, I can see you. Maybe some people in the comments can let me know if they can still see us. This is the wonders of modern technology.
So assuming we are still broadcasting, I'm just going to keep talking about this example of the whole concept that a great product plus a great experience is super important. I like to use cable TV as a great example. Cable TV today, using and we've got great cable providers here like AT&T and Comcast and Spectrum. They provide an amazing television experience. When I was a kid, there was like 4 channels. Today, there's like 400 channels, and they're in high def, and I can watch in one room, even though it's being shown or recorded in another room. I can actually watch it on my cell phone if I wanted to, because now they have the cable TV on the go. They have actually HBO Go and Showtime on TV, all of those. So they're an amazing product, but unfortunately, their industry has been marred with problems with customer service. Now, there's great companies here in the U.S., like Comcast, for example. I had a great chance to talk to their senior executive in charge of customer service. And what happened, he admitted, yes, our industry is definitely tainted when it comes to customer service. We're doing everything we can to turn that around. He shared what some of those things are. But here's the point. Here's this great product that's marred with bad service. Can you imagine what would happen if Apple or Amazon or some of these great, or Sir Richard Branson in the UK decided, I'm going to take over a cable TV company. Let's see what I can do to turn this around. I mean, here's what cable TV customers are used to. If you wanted cable TV installed in your home, it used to be that you would make an appointment for the morning or the afternoon, and they would expect you to sit at home and wait for the cable person to show up to install the cable. In other words, take a half a day off work, usually without pay, or take a half a vacation day and burn that up, and sit at home and wait for the cable guy, who usually would show up toward the end. So it just seemed that way. But anyway, what do they do today that's different? Well, today it's different because, yes, you still have your appointment during that time period. Usually now it's not a full half day. Usually they can target it within 2 hours. And many of these companies now have an app that you can put on your phone so you can see when the cable TV person's going to come. It says, they will send messages. The cable TV person's finished up the last job and is on the way to your home. They'll be there in 30 minutes or they'll be there in 20 minutes. So you can track and then meet the cable operator. So bottom line is, it's so much better today. Is it enough? Well, I think they're changing their reputation. It'll take time to do that. So there's an example of what they're trying to do to achieve a better customer experience. So anyway, James, I have lost you here. I'm going to keep talking because it appears that there's still a number of people that are still listening to us. So I'll just keep going. I actually have your list of questions.
Oh, well, in that case.
So, oh gosh, let's see. There's so many different questions. Let's talk about how you create the customer-focused culture, because customer experience is so important to every company right now. It's a competitive differentiator. If you're not careful and you don't provide that experience, another company is going to come in and disrupt you. So I have this 6-step process, and I know customer experience is bigger than customer service, but let's talk about how you create a customer-focused culture. It's a 6-step process. Hey, James, you're back.
Yes, there we go.
What happened there?
I don't know.
But I'm going to keep talking, so you just relax.
The Comcast engineer came to the door. I was expecting him last week. He finally showed up, but he showed up. That's what counts. Finally. So look, I want to hear about this process, and then I've got a bunch of questions about the stuff you just said while we were trying to figure out the technical stuff. So you keep going. Don't let me interrupt. All right. So 6-step process, and I'm going to do it in like 2 minutes. Okay. The first step is the leadership, and this is what this is about, leadership. Leadership has to define what the service vision is going to be or what the experience vision is going to be. For example, my favorite is the Ritz-Carlton. Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, worldwide recognition. What they did, and the gentleman, Horst Schultz, who was their president, came up with this, what I call mantra. I think they call it a credo, but it's 9 words long. It's real simple. We're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And he said, this is what we're all about. And when you come to work here, they teach you that. It's 9 words long, easy to remember. And then everything they do with the employee training is to train their team members to deliver on that credo. So step 1 is define the vision. Step 2 is to communicate it. Step 3 is to train to it. And this is not just a one-time thing. This is all the time. Training isn't something you did. It's something you do. Ongoing and ongoing. Step 4 is that leadership has to become the role model. In other words, they treat the people and they handle everything the same way they've created this service vision. Now they have to live it themselves. I can give you lots of examples of that. Step 5 is leaders are supposed to keep it in alignment, which means if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, they're not following the vision. Maybe it's a whole department, or if it's a larger company, it could be there's a territory or a region that's out of alignment with the vision. I once interviewed a number of CEOs, and I asked one CEO, what's your most important job? He says, I defend the culture. Leaders have to keep it in alignment. And that's the 5th step. And the 6th step is real simple and it's fun. Celebrate it when it works. So define it, communicate it, train to it, be a role model, defend it when it's going out of alignment. And number 6 is celebrate it when it works. There you go. Well, perfect. That's amazing. It's brilliant to have such complex ideas distilled down into such a simple method and a simple framework. What I want to do is go back to something you were saying before about Southwest Airlines. The idea of putting your employees first, your customers second, and your shareholders third. And that's something that Richard Branson talks about too. It's something that I talk about in my new book, Put Your Customers Second.
I love that book. When is it coming out? Is it already out?
Later this year.
Okay.
February.
You let me know, and I'm going to have you on my show. We'll promote the heck out of it.
Yeah, that'd be that'd be. It's coming along slowly, but one of the main themes that came out from the research with that book, the companies that deliver the amazing customer experience by focusing on their culture, every single one of them has this vision, and it's something you spoke about as well. How important is having a vision in delivering amazing customer experience?
Well, you've got, hey, I'm going to put it in music terms. You're going to love this. One of my favorite bands is the Beatles. Okay. And I love them. And here's what's cool. They created a vision, and they took it down to 3 words. And by the way, earlier in the show, we talked about always be amazing. That's our vision, my service and experience vision for us here and for our clients. And the Beatles had one, 3 words. I don't know, since you're a music aficionado, you may or may not know them. Bigger than, can you fill in the blank?
It wasn't Jesus, was it?
No. So and a lot of people say that, which is kind of an interesting thing. John Lennon said, he said the Beatles are bigger than Jesus. He right away apologized because he knew he'd said the wrong thing.
I mean, that's a little bit
right. That's pretty, but bigger than Elvis. Almost as big as Jesus. I don't know. No, Elvis, bigger than Elvis. So everything they did, the question came up, is this going to make us bigger than Elvis? If we record this song, is this the kind of song that would make us bigger than Elvis? If we take the famous tour they did when they went to Germany and they left Liverpool, if we do that, is this going to help make us bigger than Elvis? So they took a 3-word, point me north in the right direction. And the reason I say that is when Horst Schultz came up with, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. That was his version of bigger than Elvis. So as they made decisions about how they were going to do things, does this fall in line with the mantra? Let's talk about Southwest Airlines. Southwest is known for cheap flights. All they give you is peanuts, but it's great service. And one day the executives sit down and somebody says, it'd be nicer if we gave them a little bit more than peanuts. And I don't know exactly how the conversation went, but I can only imagine Herb Kelleher saying, hold on, I like the idea, but let me ask you a question. Is this going to keep us as the low-cost airline with great service, or is this going to add to the cost and deteriorate the service? Well, obviously, it will add to the cost. And so they go, that's not what we're about. We're not about giving away fancy meals. So by the way, I'm doing some work with Southwest coming up. And they want me to fly on Southwest. And they go, do you like flying Southwest? I go, I love Southwest. Southwest has its purpose. Now, I'm the kind of guy that if I'm flying across country, I like an assigned seat. Ideally, I want my free upgrade that I get when I fly other airlines to the first class section with more food. And I said, but I realize Southwest is a different business model. And so when I take my family on vacation, hey, I love the idea of not having to pay for bags. And, I just love the way they do it. And their attitudes toward their passengers are just so much better sometimes than on a consistent level than others. So they like to hear that because they also know that their vision doesn't necessarily align with every customer. Herb Kelleher actually once wrote a letter to a customer who was complaining and basically said, I'm sorry we didn't make you happy. I just want you to know we love you, but you should go fly on another airline. That's pretty gutsy.
It's similar to the way that Ryanair operate in Europe. Now, again, there's been some issues lately, but I used to tell people that Ryanair were one of the most customer-centric companies in the world, and people used to laugh at me. But when I explained it, is Ryanair they don't just have their own vision, but they understand the goals of their customers, and they understand their customers extremely well. And of course, it's a certain type of person who's loyal to their wallet. They're trying to pay the least amount of money possible, going on vacation, trying to save money while they do it. So everything they do is aligned towards the delivery of success for that type of customer. But traditional business people, that's not what they want at all. But Ryanair don't want traditional business people to fly with them because we demand too much. We want drinks and we want food and so for their customers, they are extremely customer centric. It's just that most people aren't their customers. So that's a great way, really interesting way to look at it. And so get into the, actually, you know what? I did want to tell you, I have played on the stage in the Cavern in Liverpool where the Beatles used to play.
Oh, cool, man.
It's kind of small, but, it was an amazing thing to do. I played there as well. They've got a bigger stage now, like they've created another room. But that was an amazing experience. That was one of those things where you're like, not saying, I've made it, but it's almost like a spiritual home of music, because if it wasn't for the Beatles, there would be no heavy metal music today. So I'm
going to go prior to the Beatles. The Beatles took a lot of inspiration. Paul McCartney loved, I think it's Johnny Johnson, piano player. But there was a guy here in the U.S., Chuck Berry. You know Chuck Berry. Yeah. Chuck Berry lived just outside of St. Louis, and he played in a club here called Blueberry Hill. And there's a room they called the Duck Room, because this duck walk that where it goes across the stage. They call it the Duck Room. And Chuck Berry, up until the time he died just a few years ago, once a month would come and play the Duck Room, this tiny little venue. And I love the idea that I've been on that stage. My daughter's actually played on that stage as well. So kind of the same thing. Although I think the Beatles, oh man, they're one of my favorites. So
well, it was almost like they were the original sort of rock stars. You know what I mean? They couldn't go anywhere without getting swamped.
They changed music forever.
They did. And whether you like their music or not, you can't help but respect what they did to the industry.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So look, bringing it back to the whole leadership and customer experience thing, do you feel there are particular elements of a customer experience that leadership affects more than others? Are there certain areas of an experience that are heavily affected by leadership and other areas that aren't really affected at all, both positively and negatively?
Well, once again, the leader sets the vision, but the leader, the step 4 is they have to be a role model. And I think if they don't role model properly, it's going to destroy the vision. You can't say something and act a different way. So there's 2 examples I want to share with you. One, I call it the employee golden rule, which is to do unto your employees as you want done unto the customer. The regular golden rule is do unto others as you want done unto yourself. So if a boss brings the employee into the office and starts screaming and yelling at them and just belittling them and saying, now go out there and be nice to everybody. It doesn't work real well. There's an old expression. I saw it on a T-shirt that says the beatings won't stop until your morale gets better. And so that's an old one. But the other example I want to share with you is Walt Disney, one of the great leaders. He took the theme park industry and elevated it into something that's just the most incredible experience, all because he wanted a cleaner, better, safer, more enjoyable experience for his kids or his grandkids. And so one of the things Walt Disney was known for is walking through the theme park, and he would do this on a regular basis. And he had his routine, and this is out in Anaheim, California, where the first Disneyland was, and people would watch him. And he would see a piece of paper on the ground. He'd look at it. He'd stoop down, pick it up, and throw it away, because he knew that everybody was watching him. And if he walked by that piece of paper without stooping down to pick it up and throw it away, he was giving permission to everyone else to do the same. He called this stooping to excellence. And it's a great metaphor for know as a leader that everybody's watching you. They're watching your behavior. They're watching how you act toward others. They're watching how you act toward customers, toward your family, toward other employees. And they will behave accordingly based on the way you are. So, treat your employees the way you want your customers treated, if not even better, and then recognize as a leader that you've got to be the role model to step up. And by the way, that doesn't mean the CEO leader. You could be the manager of a small department. You're the leader.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant example. Just leading by example, just being a role model for the people around you. So being a role model, we can agree, is one element of being a brilliant customer experience leader. What other elements are there to be an amazing customer experience leader?
Well, first of all, you have to have that vision, and it's, again, having the vision, defining the vision so it's clear and concise, and then communicating the vision. I think somebody who's a great leader will have that vision. They'll understand how to execute the vision. I talked about that 6-step process. Not that long ago, I was doing a presentation for some larger companies, a bunch of C-level executives from these companies. And this guy raises his hand and he says, "Excuse me, Shep, you keep talking about the 6-step simple process. I'm a little confused. It sounds simple, but I mean, how long will it take for my company to execute on this?" And I said, "Well, how big is your company?" So we have about 35,000 employees. I said, "I'm thinking 5 to 6 years." He goes, 5 or 6 years? You said it was easy. I said, "No, I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple." Easy is different than simple. And at that point, everybody in the room recognized, if you got a tiny little company, this is easy. But if you got a larger company, there's lots of moving parts and complexity. So you've got to be able to execute on this vision. And that means you've got to bring a team around you, and everybody has to understand their responsibilities and what it's going to take to go out and make this happen. And also, patience is a virtue. If it's a large company, it's going to take a little bit more time. Number 2, measurement. So important to measure from the beginning and incrementally measure the increased positive results that you're having so that you can share that with the team. And a good leader will recognize when the results are happening and will share it with the team as needed so that these people can stay motivated and recognize that things are working.
Well, I think the measurement is a really interesting part. Customer experience measurement is a notoriously difficult thing to do. So how do you approach it?
With the measurement, so there has to be a starting point, and then there's checkpoints along the way to see if you're increasing. Let's take something really simple. Let's talk about NPS. There's lots of different ways to measure. You've got CSAT, which is customer satisfaction scores. You've got customer effort scores. NPS is the net promoter score. Now, I love the net promoter score. I think there's other things to measure as well. Net promoter, for those that don't know it, is a simple question. On a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being bad and 10 being amazing, what's the likelihood that you would recommend us to a friend or a colleague? And a 9 or a 10 is a promoter, hence the net promoter score. If somebody's giving you a 9 or a 10, they're likely to do it. 7 or 8, those are called passives. They're satisfied customers. That means you don't know if they're satisfied, leaning toward being a promoter, or going the other direction and being what's known as a detractor, somebody who doesn't like you, wouldn't recommend you, might even say bad things about you. So that's a simple measurement, if you will. And if you ask your customers, by the way, a short survey, less than a minute long, is the likelihood of getting that answered by a customer is far higher than if you send somebody a 20-minute survey. Somebody who fills out a 20-minute survey could potentially get survey fatigue, and they can log off. You never get that information. They might get frustrated with you because many times those long surveys are actually, I think about it. I called somebody. I had a 3-minute conversation with a support person on the phone, yet I received a 20-minute survey. I mean, come on. The survey's taken longer to deal with than the actual phone call that I made to a company to get help. So anyway, do the right measurement, get a benchmark in place, and then along the way, incrementally check it out. Sounds, again, pretty simple in theory. It's a little bit harder to execute, but that's the basic way to get it done.
Okay, well, I'll talk to you a little bit about NPS a little bit later.
Okay.
So one of the things you mentioned, like not acting as a role model, is a big mistake that customer experience leaders can make. What other mistakes can customer experience leaders make that we can watch out for?
Wow. Okay. So, boy, was this in the list of questions that you gave me?
I think so, somewhere.
No, I'm one of these positive people that typically, I look for the positive and everything. But let's talk about what leaders don't do. Number one, leaders don't they don't play the role as we talked about. Leaders create a vision that's far more complicated and difficult to remember. How many times have you read a vision or mission statement, and it's like, okay, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, even the next day, you can't recite it. Why? Yeah. Because it's a page long. And I'll sit in executive, like in a CEO roundtable or C-suite roundtable, and there's the chairman, the CEO, the president, all these executives. And I could randomly pick somebody who's not the CEO and say, can you tell me what the CEO's vision is for the company? And over half the time, it used to be more than that, but more than half the time still, these people can't. And they're very uncomfortable that I would ask them that question. And the reason is because it's a full page of gobbledygook. Dumb it down to one sentence, like the Ritz-Carlton. We're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. There was a great one. I wish I could remember exactly how it goes, but it's something like, we love our customers so much when we kiss them, their lips will bleed. Okay.
That's pretty heavy metal. That's pretty brutal.
It's crazy, but they're a fun company to be around, and that's the way they want to position. We love you. We're gonna kiss you. The passion is there, and so it's like, are you acting and behaving in a way that's going to deliver on this vision that we have? So anyway, once again, many mistakes are made because the vision is too complicated. Oh, there's 8 pillars. Well, if you go up to somebody, what's the likelihood that they're going to remember all 8 pillars? Now, if it's 8 pillars driving toward a single statement, I'm okay with that. But if all you expect is for people to remember 8 sentences or 8 lines or the 10 commandments, unless they go to school and learn the 10 commandments when they're young and they get tested on it over and over and over again, you're not going to remember the 10 commandments. But in business, if you're going to create a 10 commandment type structure, by the way, back to Disney, they have the 10 commandments of the way people are supposed to behave in their corporate offices. And so what they do is they say, we want you to remember all 10 of them, but let's do it easily. Let's take 1. Let's work through 1 for the entire week. Next week, we'll do 2, week after 3, 4, 5. Once we get to 10, after that, we start over all over again. By the end of the year, you've gone through it 5+ times. And that's one of the ways you can get habits formed, and a 10 commandment type structure will work. But at the same time, I still believe you've got that overarching 1 sentence, 1 line vision. So here's a couple of thoughts on what leaders might do that hold them back from being amazing and creating amazing service experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, overcomplicating things. If things are too complicated for your employees, down the line, it's going to be too complicated for the customers. Being able to deliver that sort of streamlined, simple experience for the customers, I mean, that's really the holy grail if we're going with Bible references.
What do you want to be known for? And figure out how to deliver on it.
Yeah. So we pretty much know that there are lots of different ways of going to improve customer experience, but a lot of routes that companies are taking is by taking that leadership piece of the puzzle and making sure that's really good and hoping that filters down. Do you know of any companies that have really sort of turned their fortunes around by focusing on their leadership, and it has filtered down to the customer experience?
Wow, there's so many companies that if you look at, you look at the people, that start out with that customer-focused vision. Tony Hsieh, for example, from Zappos.com. What he said is, I want to create an experience that's so good that, people just love us, and did a great job. But if you want a good turnaround story, Mike Abrashoff was a commander in the Navy, the United States Navy, and he was given the very worst ship in the fleet. And within, I'd say, a fairly short period of time, I want to say it was almost 2 years, he turned that ship around to become one of the most admired ships in the fleet. And it's really fascinating to hear his story. And I would never be able to do his story, justice, because he tells it far better than I do. But one of the things he focused on is, first of all, a little incremental changes to make things better. That's the message I get from it. But most important is he used the people to get there. he found a way to connect with the people. And when the people loved their commander, they would do what was necessary to make it happen.
It's a great. It's almost like having that sort of creating a family out of the company and realizing that you're all in it together. And too many times in companies, departments are working against each other and they're in silos. Whereas the companies that perform the best do treat the people like Zappos and Tony Shea that you mentioned, treat it as one big family and one big team, and they're not working against each other. They're working with each other to achieve that vision, to achieve that goal. So I imagine there's going to be some people watching this that maybe have just taken on a new role as a CX leader, and they might be thinking, oh, where do I start? So for you, if you could only pass on one piece of wisdom to somebody that's taken a CX leadership role recently, what would that be? So
one of the things that companies have been doing lately is they create this journey map, the customer experience journey. And that is from the moment the customer thinks about doing business with you, not just as actually doing business with you. There's the concept called the zero moment of truth, the moment of truth in business. Yeah. Jan Carlson came up with that. Anytime a customer comes into contact with any aspect of a business, they form an impression. So manage that interaction. But even before the customer even knows what company they're going to go with, they may go to Google and start looking around. They don't even know it's you they're going to land on. So what experience could you create in that process? That is, as soon as they click on a link that's on a Google search, they come to your website. Do they immediately, what's the feeling they get? Anyway, every interaction point, every touch point the customer has, especially the human-to-human touch points, map those out. Now that's at the top line. Underneath the touch points, and this is where many companies, they stop at the top line. But what I want to do is I want to create a culture where every single person knows what their contribution to the customer experience is. So underneath the top line, I have what I call impact points. I'll give you an example. Since Jan Carlson came up with the moment of truth concept on the airlines, Scandinavian Airlines, if you want to, back in the 80s when he took over, if you wanted to make a reservation, you had to pick up and make a phone call. Now that's a main touch point, a main moment of truth, as he calls it. On the day of departure, you check your bags at the curb, you see somebody at the ticket counter, you see somebody at the gate. All of these are major touch points. But let's talk about checking that bag at the curb. You check that bag at the curb, and 4 hours later, you're at your destination, and you walk out, and there's a baggage carousel, and here comes your bag coming off the conveyor belt and almost directly into your hands. Again, by the way, another touch point. If that touch point, by the way, is failed and the bag doesn't show up, that's a moment of misery, as I like to call it. So let's assume it happens. Well, what happens behind the scenes? From the time I actually handed the bag to the baggage handler at the airport and I see it going off on the conveyor belt down into the bowels of the airport, something is going to happen to get it to appear at the baggage carousel 1,000 miles later. And that is a lot of people moving my bag from this cart to that cart, to getting it on the plane, to getting it where it's supposed to go. So behind the scenes, you have all of these impact points. And at any given time, if the impact point fails, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to fail at the frontline touch point. In a warehouse, for example, the person in a warehouse may say, I never deal with the customer. I don't ever see the customer. I never talked to a customer in my life. But the guy in the warehouse, his or her job may be to go pull an item off the shelf and pack it in a box properly, similar to what we talked about earlier in the show, where when the customer opens it up, they can see it's filled, it's been protected. And by the way, that warehouse person, if they don't put the right part in the box, or if there was 5 items and they only put 4 in, what's happened is they've now created a moment of misery for that customer who's got to call up, complain that something's broken or complain that something's missing. So really that person in the warehouse is a pretty good, important role when it comes to the customer experience. Maybe it's a person in the accounting department who doesn't properly invoice a customer. The customer opens it up and it's wrong. That's a moment of misery. If they took the time to do it right, the first time, the customer wouldn't have to call, wouldn't have to put the people and the employees through doing a search and checking things and making sure, only to find out it was wrong. So once again, somebody in accounting, somebody in the warehouse, somebody in payroll, doesn't matter. Everybody has a role. So by looking at not just the touch points at the top, but the impact points that drive the touch points, you can prove that every department and therefore every employee has impact on the customer experience.
I think that's a great point to make, and it kind of brings everything full circle. And it highlights the intrinsic link between customer experience and process. And like, I've spent a lot of my career dealing with process people saying you need to focus on the customer. Now I spend a lot of my time with customer people saying you need to focus on your processes. But it's realizing that they're not different things. It's all just stuff that's happening. Some of the stuff happens with the customer, some of the stuff happens without the customer, and realizing that the things that happen with the customer are those moments of truth, those touch points. And as you say, they could be a moment of misery or a moment of magic. But it's taking that understanding a step further, like you were talking with Google, that it's not just every interaction the customer has with your company, it's every interaction the customer has with the entire experience in and around your company. And so Google talk about this really well. There's a book called The Zero Moment of Truth. I'm not sure if you've read it. And it's that understanding that the moment you become aware that you need to achieve something, usually the very next thing you do, the very first thing you do that kicks off your entire experience is go and Google something. So that's that Google kicks off a lot of the experiences with every company in the world. And I think in with that as well, what you were saying, the vision, having that vision there, so the person in the warehouse knows that what they do on a day-to-day basis, how it impacts the customer and how it impacts on customer success is vital to be able to make all of this work together. So I think that insight there is amazing. So right, thinking about people at the top of the pyramid, people who are behind the scenes, customer service people that are in the warehouses. I'm a big believer that just because you don't necessarily have a title that says you're a leader, and just because you don't necessarily have the responsibility for other people, doesn't mean you can't be a leader in what you do.
Spot on.
Thank you. So what would be your best advice to people who are in that position, who want to be a leader in the organization, but don't actually have the title of a leader? What would be your best advice to them to really help make a difference?
Right. My buddy, Mark Sanborn, actually, I think if he didn't write a book, I know he does a speech on you don't need a title to be a leader. And that is, you come to work every day doing the best job that you can do. And you're the kind of person where people look over and go, wow, that's how I want to do it. If especially when it comes to customer service, if they see somebody who's just really excellent at delivering a great service experience, people around go, wow, that's how we need to do it. That's what a leader does. It's not about a title. One of the books that I wrote prior to Be Amazing or Go Home was called Amaze Every Customer Every Time. And in that book, there's 52 tools that are, and the first tool is to act like an owner. And by the way, I call them tools because I use a hardware store as an example of a role model throughout, because it's a simple concept. Everybody's been to a hardware store. So the story here is, in this particular story, even though I was using a hardware store, what made me come up with this is when I walked and I did into the store and I did my research, I recognized everybody was acting like this guy named Clark, who I met a couple of years back. The Clark worked at a pizza restaurant. And one day, he was just a kid, 18 years old. One day, somebody asked him, excuse me, but are you the owner, or at least the son of the owner? And he goes, well, why would you ask that? And the customer said, because you are so good and you're trying so hard to make our evening enjoyable. We thought, you're not normal. You've got to be the owner or the owner's son. And he smiled. At that moment, he realized, I want every one of my customers to think that I'm the owner. I want to be that good. You don't need the title to be a leader. You don't need the ownership to act like an owner.
And what do you think the best way to nurture that is within people? So if you are a leader and you want your people who aren't leaders to act like leaders and act like owners, what would you say the best way to nurture that within people is?
Sure. The first is to be the kind of owner that people would want to be like. Okay,
Yeah.
it makes sense. So, you want to be like, so that was the thing. And I asked Clark when he came up to me, I just finished a speaking presentation. He was in the audience. I was working for the Vail, Colorado Chamber of Commerce, and they had all these different businesses sending all their employees, getting ready for the big ski season. And Clark came up and he shared this with me. And we talked about it. Number one, his boss, the owner, was somebody that he wanted to be like. So that's number one. Number two, and this is huge, the boss empowered Clark to do what it took to make people, to make his employees feel like they could do what's necessary to take care of the customer. Hence, they could act like an owner.
I think it's fantastic advice. So be the sort of person that you want your employees to be, which is
right.
It's so simple. Okay, so look, I know it depends on the situation, and it maybe depends on the industry and the type of customers you've got. There will be lots of different strategies of how to improve your customer experience. But let's say somebody has decided that improving their leadership is the best strategy for them. What is the best strategy to improve your current leadership? Wow,
great question. The best strategy is hire a good leadership coach. Or hire me. No, I'm not a leadership coach, but leaders, they need to understand people really well. They need to understand what's going on. And most leaders who are really, really good and effective, they have two sides to what they're really good at. They're really good at understanding the operation. They're really good at understanding the numbers. And a lot of times that's what's taught in school. How do you read, all these financial sheets, and how can you put together the deal? Okay. But on the other side, there's this whole people side. And how do we communicate effectively with our people? How do we treat them in a way that they want to work hard? So there was a gentleman named Brian Keeley. Brian, I think he still is the CEO of an organization called Baptist Health South. It's a hospital medical network down in the southern part of Florida here in the U.S. So he said that our goal is to create destination employment. And by the way, all these concepts start with the leader. It starts at the top, and with the leader defining how they want their culture to be. We've already talked about this. So what destination employment meant to him was when somebody comes to work at a Baptist Health South unit, whatever, they're either in a clinic, in a hospital, whatever they do, he wants to create a job that's so fulfilling that people want to come back next day and never want to leave. Now, that's a pretty big thing. So I actually came up with this concept called FUN, F-U-N. Let's have fun at work. Well, it's not about having a party, but FUN stands for F is fulfillment, which we just talked about, making sure your employees are happy with the job that they have. In other words, give them a job that they want, not just that they need, or if it is a job that they need, when they get there, make sure that they like it and want to stay with it and do the best that they can. The U stands for uniqueness. What uniqueness does this person bring to the job that we can exploit? For example, if somebody speaks English and Spanish, where can we allow them to use Spanish in their day-to-day role? Maybe that's who knows what it is. There was a gentleman that worked at a restaurant at a hotel. And I said, how many years you been here? I've been coming back for years. He says, oh, yeah, I've been working here for 15 years. I go, do you love it? He goes, I love it. They actually let me do things that I like to do. I go, like what? He says, well, I'm really into video. So the hotel decided they wanted to have a video presence on YouTube, and they knew that I was really good at it. That's my hobby. So they said, hey, would you do a video about once every month or two and just post it on YouTube to show what's going on here at the hotel? So he was hired to be a server at a restaurant, but he gets to do something that he loves. They exploited him for his uniqueness. And the N, so you got fulfillment, uniqueness. N for the fun is next. What's happening next at the company? Are we excited to come back to work for the next big thing? Is it a new product? Is it just we're so good that people love coming back the next day because they enjoy their job and the people they work with? So Brian Keeley did an amazing job of creating that fun environment. Again, fulfillment, uniqueness, and next.
Well, it's interesting you should talk about that next, that vision for the future. In your opinion, what will the future of customer experience leadership look like?
Wow, big question. So somebody's going to be in charge of this. And that's why they now have the chief experience officer, the chief customer officer, but somebody is going to be in charge. And ultimately, it rests on the highest person, because if the buck truly stops at the top, then that is. But somebody's going to. And then the question is, if we have a chief experience officer, who reports to the chief experience officer? What is that chief experience officer responsible for? And the simple answer is, well, they're responsible for the experience. And who provides that experience? Everybody has a piece in it. So all of the different departments, there will be a role that at some point where they need to talk to this chief experience officer or chief customer officer. By the way, don't get hung up on the term, but there would be somebody at the top. And everybody says, well, does the chief marketing officer, the CMO, the VP of sales, operations, they don't necessarily report to this person, but they're intimately involved. Here's the thing, a customer-focused organization, the question that's constantly asked is every part of the operation, if you analyze it, does this drive a better or worse experience for a customer? If we're going to do something new, if we're going to roll out a new product, we're going to change the system, the question to ask is, how will this impact the customer? By the way, it may impact them negatively, but if you choose to do it, at least you've done the due diligence of exploring how it's going to impact the customer and made a smart decision. Even if it's, if you say, hey, we have to raise our prices, customers probably aren't going to be happy with that. But if we don't, what will happen? Well, we might not be able to afford to deliver the better service that we've always delivered. And there's lots of other things that can happen. So even though it's a decision that might not make customers happy, it is one that needs to be made.
I get that. Definitely.
Yeah. And that's a simplified version or answer.
No, it's but again, it's powerful in its simplicity. So look, right, I've got a lot of controversial beliefs when it comes to customer experience. It's why some people like me, but
You're
also
a metal guy. What do you think?
it's also why a lot more people don't like me, but that's okay. So one of my controversial beliefs is that not just NPS, but all customer feedback is kind of useless. Right, I won't go into that now. We can talk about that a little bit more offline.
Well, I know why you say that. I know exactly why you say it. There's really only one thing that matters. That's this. Did the customer come back? And how often they come back? Because most feedback, like the NPS score, which, by the way, I love and it has its place, but what it measures is intent. It doesn't measure actual behavior. Yeah. And the behavior is, does the customer come back over and over again? If you don't get that, it doesn't matter how happy they were with you.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? There are some companies that don't ask how likely would you be to recommend us. They ask, have you ever recommended us? Which I think is a far more powerful question. But of course, a lot of people don't like asking that because you're going to get lower scores, because it's about the 1 to 10 is possible future intent, maybe. Whereas the have you ever is, well, it is what it is.
It's not a 1 to 10. It's 1 for yes, 2 for no.
Yeah, it's black and white, yes and no, ones and zeros. But so that's one of my controversial beliefs. What is your most controversial belief when it comes to customer experience, that when you tell people, they think you're a little bit crazy?
Well, I don't think they think I'm a little bit crazy when I say the customer is not always right, because everybody says treat the customer like they're always right. No, you don't. And it's not so much controversial, but the idea is you treat the customer like the customer. Right or wrong, you let them be wrong with dignity and respect, because even when they're wrong, that doesn't mean they're unhappy with you. It means they don't understand something. So example, I once tried to check into a hotel I think I was in Toronto, Canada or somewhere, and I showed up at the hotel late at night. They were sold out, and the woman said, you do not have a reservation here. And I showed her my reservation, and all of a sudden she's going, oh my gosh, he's got a reservation for our hotel, but I don't see it, and it's not here. Hold on. The customer's always right. The customer's always right. But she's now completely confused on what to do, because it's obvious as she looked closer, I was at the wrong hotel. Same name, wrong street. Okay, the cab driver dropped me off. Now she's got to tell me I'm wrong, but her boss said, no, the customer's always right. What's she going to do? She was very confused. She was very new. And when we figured it out, we had a good laugh about it. And the bellman actually late at night took me in the hotel van to the other hotel where I was supposed to be. But for a while there, she was very confused. Yeah. So the customer is not always right, but they're always the customer. So you let them be wrong with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And remember, when you get into an argument with the customer, which is probably the worst thing that could happen, you're not trying to win the argument. You're trying to win the customer. So I know that's not really controversial, but at least it's a little bit of a different way of thinking. Most people, the customer is always right. Not true. They're not always right.
I think that's a great snippet from it. Don't win the argument, win the customer. And that's it's a really good way to look at it. So look, I want to say a massive thank you for being with us today. And
my pleasure.
Can you just let us know, where can people stay in touch with you?
Just go to hyken.com, HYKEN.com, and there you'll find everything you want to know about me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'll wrap up now. So guys, thank you so much for being tuned in today. If you want to learn a little bit more about the tools, techniques, mindsets, and methodologies of some of the best performing companies in the world, as some of the most customer-centric companies in the world, make sure to join me on the 26th of March in Orlando for the Accredited Customer Experience Master Training. If you'd like to know a little bit more, check out the description. There's a link below, or drop me an email at james@jamesdodkins.com. But until next time, keep on delivering that rockstar customer experience.
You've been tuned into ROCKSTAR CX. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.